The growing the food in the Rondo neighborhood started decades ago with a group called SAGE, Selby Avenue Gardeners Enthusiasms. And at that time, my brother met. So the urban farm, it started about officially 2014. However, the growing the food in the Rondo neighborhood started decades ago with a group called SAGE, Selby Avenue Gardeners Enthusiasms. And at that time, my brother Medrick was part of that. And they worked with Rondo Land Trust quite a bit, where there was an empty lot. Before they moved the house on it, they would do some gardening. The space we're in, there used to be a home here, and it burned down. When it became just a lot, some folks in the community started growing food. And we started noticing certain things. I have always worked with Bethel University, so I've been fortunate to work with college students during the summertime. And one of the college students I asked her to do a map of all the different sites that we was part of. And she did this creative piece that ended up looking like, we called it the watermelon map, because it had vines going over, and she used watermelons as the spot. And the more I looked at that map, the more it looked like a matrix. And that was about the same time the movie The Matrix was out. So we just started saying we're going to create a matrix of how we feed ourselves in this neighborhood. And about that same time, a group called Afroeco, again, a group my brother was part of, Setu Jones, Sam Grant, Michael Cheney, Dr. Rose Brewer, Dr. Fimby, Afroeco. And the eco, people kept saying, what's the eco? And it could be economy, it could be environment, but it was definitely about our system. And so they did approach me about this garden site to turn it into an environmental learning center. And Setu Jones came up with a nice paper. He could be called Dr. Setu right now, probably. And part of it was to work with the Area Learning Center School, which is now in Gordon Parks. And the students will walk down here twice a week from Dale, when they was still on Dale Street. And when they walk down, they would be doing what Mary Sella is doing right now, picking up trash, cleaning up the neighborhood. And then they would get here and they would work in the garden. And so what you see here is from those students, and some fantastic teachers, and a fantastic sister who's not with us no more, named Deborah Terrain. She worked directly with the students. She passed away years ago. Her heart and soul is in this space here. We also had a sister farmer named Padita. Padita brought back some garlic from Detroit, and that we started calling Motown garlic. And we used that garlic as a tool to say, let's have a community garlic day to get neighbors to come out to learn about the benefits of garlic, how it can help your blood pressure, to lower it, how it can stabilize your cholesterol, some other benefits besides making food taste really good. So we've been doing a community garlic planting at least for 10 years now at different sites. Also in 2014, or prior to 2014, Seytu Jones was doing this thing called Create the Meal. About that same time, they was having a lot of conversations about the Central Corridor, the light rail. Some of that conversation had started back in the 90s. And at the time, they were saying that, oh, you won't lose no parking on University Avenue. And we know how that went. However, Seytu Jones, he had this dream about a half-mile long table on Victoria Street. And about that same time, this garden, the garden site, one of our gardens on Victoria, the Frogtown Farm was popping up. We started calling Victoria Green Street. And again, green for food, green for wealth, green for health. Some of us, I definitely believe that they changed the name of the Central Corridor light rail to the Green Line because of the work that people in Rondo and Frogtown was doing. They call it the Green Line now. Seytu Jones did have a half-mile table. 2,000 people sat down together. They had about 100 volunteers serving people food. And that was all connected to this matrix that we can feed ourselves in this community. Also, our second year Urban Farm and Garden Alliance, people started noticing what we was doing. In the state of Minnesota, they have this thing called the Farmer of the Year for each county. Each county has a farmer, and most time it is in the rural area or the suburb, and for a family. We are really happy that our second year in 2015, that the Urban Farm and Garden Alliance represented Ramsey County, and we became the Family Farm of the Year. We had to travel out to Morton, Minnesota to receive our award, which was okie dokie, but we definitely could tell that there was not many farmers of color at all, even though we know there have been hundreds and hundreds of farmers of color, and there are farmers of color today in Minnesota. And it's really hard for these farmers of color to navigate through the system that our white counterpart farmers have access to funding in particular. And a lot of it has to do with who's in office. And I'm really happy again that right now things are changing. That we are getting people who look like me, people who, different genders, different sexual orientation, are in positions to help people to do normal things, like being able to access some funding, particularly at this time right now of COVID. Sister drove by today, Sister Vera, about the only black person I know who has a farmer's market. You know, she had to share with me that she had to move and change around. What's happening today, I believe, is there's a beautiful organizing happening. Some people might say BIPOC people. I just say black and brown people, where people are trying to live with the seasons and trying to work together. The best example for me of living with the seasons is the Red Lake Nation. Even though we are talking about the Urban Farm and Gardening Alliance, we are connected to the Red Lake Nation. One of the ways we are connected to them, back in 2006, 2007, 2008, I recall doing some animal clinic work there. And part of that, me asking permission, could I grow a little garden in the back of this area? And even though it didn't grow too much, knowing I was going to be going there at least 3 times during the summer, started growing the garden. If you go there now, that same site has a huge hoop farm. It has a big, they're just doing some wonderful things because they had decided to start reclaiming living with the seasons. So when it's wintertime, when that big red lake gets kind of frozen, they do ice fishing. There's a time to grow rice. There's a time for certain things. But that's happening because people are talking to each other and listening to each other. We have a sister named Zoe who's organizing the Midwestern farmers right now, farmers of color. The Urban Farm and Garden Alliance, we try to support those efforts. We are fond of saying part of our mission is just to get people to play fair together. I'm always asked, what's the problem? How come black folks cannot work together? And for me, it's like black folks do work together. They work together all the time. And it's not about perfection. I don't know any group who work together perfectly. And black folks do work together. One thing we have to do so is keep remembering our history. Even if that history is 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 50 years ago. In this neighborhood, they used to have a black co-op. Rondo used to just be thriving. So that question again is segregation or integration. How do we find that balance? Especially when you have other cultures moving in, especially when you have folks marrying different cultures. How do we honor individuals who choose just to be human beings? I definitely believe, people talk about the Holocaust. And I think most folks know that the first Holocaust on this land was, just the wiping out of First Nation people. People didn't just die. They was killed, they was murdered, they was not seen as human. We now have some other Holocausts, those Puritan people where they burned women for just touching herb. When women was wives of all colors, men would burn them. That's a Holocaust. People have to remember certain things. This is 2020, going where you're going, 2021, and we still sometimes have a hard time hearing truth, or we have a hard time of thinking that strength or being strong means just talking loud or just running your mouth. We currently have very toxic leadership. And so happy that I think we are about ready to usher in that Obama type of leadership. That leadership that says when they go low, we just got to rise. And how do we rise together? How do we bring more unity? The Urban Farm and Garden Alliance is about unity. It's about black people, it's about brown people, and it's about white people. It's about people, but this neighborhood definitely is African American that accepts all folks. And we like our friends who used to be almost all white in Frogtown. They don't even know who they are no more. They got so many folks of color over there, they get a little style. I like that. That's how the farm is coming around.